First of all, thank you to IDSA and Dr. Meena for the opportunities. And I was actually hoping that Commodore Bhaskar is my neighbor. And we actually live next door in the campus. I'm hoping that, I know you're very illiberal when it comes to time management, so I hope I can indulge you. In the morning, I did a dry run. It came to 17 minutes. So I tried to squeeze within 15 minutes. Two broad caveats before we start, because there was reference to the expression Middle East yesterday. The reason is simple. That is how the region describes itself. So therefore, you can't call Burma, it's Myanmar. So therefore, the same logic. The second thing is, one should never look at the origin of a saint or a river. We'll be extremely disappointed what we find out. And if you look at it, the very word India is not Indian. So if you are so much for our terminologies. Then you can ask me, why not India's? Why Modi's? You could say India's challenges. Why it's Modi's challenge? And I'm sure that Meena will go into the details later today, how the things are evolving in the last 4 years. The kind of political engagement that India has with the Middle East since 2014 is unprecedented. It never happened since 1947. The Indian leaders have visited all the countries of the region with the exception of Libya. I think that is something we need to take. Therefore, it is Modi's challenge, not India's challenge. I'm going to examine what are the challenges Modi faces in the light of three major players. With all due respect, I'm not including European Union, at least for today. China, Russia, and the United States. The first one is Iran. Iran is going to be a major challenge when India deals with it. We are slightly better off than in 2005 when we did not anticipate the American anger and sanctions. Today, we are slightly better off. What would actually it would mean? No matter what the official statement comes up, there is going to be a substantial reduction in India's imports of oil from Iran. It may not be zero, but there is going to be a substantial reduction. That is what you're going to see. We also have a problem in terms of payments. You cannot pay in dollars. You can't pay in euro. Renminbi is little tempting. I don't think India will take that line because of political repercussions. And the rupee agreement is not going to work. So we need to find out a payment mechanism if India had to continue importing oil from Iran. So therefore, what I would say that there is going to be a substantial reduction, which is largely because of what President Trump is trying to do. The second thing is, we find out all the three major players are not in a position to mediate any of the conflicts. Each one is trying to intensify the conflict in their own level. Therefore, India is going to be in a difficult situation. That crisis is going to continue in the region for some time to come. And this is coming at a time when there is a very clear decline in the American influence in the region. A large number of events are happening in spite of the United States. And India doesn't see any other power or a coalition of powers which is going to replace the US role in the wider region. So therefore, India is going to be in a situation that there is not much peacemaking effort which is going to be successful on that. The third point on the oil. We have an interesting thing. India is going to compete with China in oil imports, but India is going to be helped by the United States in terms of oil supplies. So that as a result, the share of Persian Gulf in India's total oil has come down significantly. Until recently, we were importing somewhere around 2/3 of our oil from the region. Last year, the imports have come down to just over 55%, partly because of US stepping in as a supplier. This is reflected in the negative impact on some of the smaller economies of the region. That is, India's oil imports from Yemen has almost stopped because of the domestic situation. It has imports from Yemen and Bahrain has come down significantly in recent years, largely because of the US. The fourth is engagement. If you look at it, the US seemed to be following under the present administration to be an antithesis of Dale Carnegie. How to make enemies, how to make friends into enemies. So therefore, US is not going to be a good role model for us. But Russia is an interesting case. As it was referred today, Russia is the only country which is actually dealing with all the major players in the region. Israel and the Palestinian Authority. Not only that, Hamas and Fatah. It's Turkey and Syria, Iran and Saudi Arabia. So you have an enormous engagement at wide-ranging levels. But the only problem is the Russian influence is very visible only in the Syrian context. And in other areas, we are yet to see the Russian influence in the diplomatic sense of the word. So if you look at it, Russia has almost lost its regional influence after 1967. And Putin is trying to revive the situation, but we are not seeing any tangible results except in the Syrian case. But the Chinese example is interesting. China was kept politics out, so their engagement is largely economic in nature. So therefore, India can follow the political model of the Russians and the economic model of the Chinese, probably to be more successful than Russia, probably, I would say, less successful than China when it comes to economy. That is going to be a challenge, how we are going to navigate. The fifth issues, I'm doing telegraphically, my apologies, because I know Bhaskar being Bhaskar. So, fifth is Islam. If you look at it, when it comes to Islam, with all due respect, the great powers are not going to be a model for India. We'll go into the details why US, Russia and China cannot be a model for India. We can go into that. But India has an enormous advantage. India could actually leverage it. If you look at it, there is a significant process of what I would call moderate Islam. People are, all the number of regimes are trying to reform Islam and official patronage. And that is where India's strength lies. And I'm sure both within Saudi Arabia and in the region, lot of them want MBS to fail, because that is going to be good for them. And reforms, if they take it to a logical conclusion, the conservatives are going to be the losers. So everyone wants them to lose. I think that is where India's strength comes up. And India should actually leverage its position in strengthening the relations and to give something, okay, wherever there is a reform process, India will have to identify. That is going to be an interesting challenge. And that's not going to be difficult. And I think that is personified by Prime Minister Modi himself. And what you see, if you're familiar with Indian internal and external politics, Modi within India and Modi once he crosses the Indian airspace are completely different personalities. And we can go into the details why I'm saying this. Modi is much more narrow within the Indian context. He has never attended iftar parties. He never wears skull cap. Until he was forced to go with Shinzo Abe in Gujarat, he never even visited a mosque after he became Prime Minister. The first place he landed in Abu Dhabi was a Grand Mosque. So Modi outside India is an inclusive, accommodative person. So therefore, that is going to be extremely useful for India if India had to reach out. The last part, the Arab-Israeli conflict. And you don't see any of the three players finding any real solution to that. They are actually making things worse. And I will just take the one issue, Jerusalem. And if you look at the international community, never recognized West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel from 1948. Forget about Eastern part, I'm talking Western Jerusalem. None of the major powers are recognized. Trump decided to completely undo everything in a matter of days. And all the resolutions and everything passed, nothing has happened. But if you look at the Indian position, it's becoming much more sophisticated. In the last 10 years, India has recognized, or India openly said, we support an independent, sovereign, viable Palestinian state with East Jerusalem. But if you look at it, in the last year or so, after July, India quietly dropped East Jerusalem. We are simply looking at a Palestinian state, that's it, not a capital. And this was reflected in the BRICS summit in China last year. So it is gradually becoming not only Indian position, it's also a position of the BRICS. And I think that is where India doesn't recognize West Jerusalem as a capital. It doesn't recognize East Jerusalem as a capital. So it's simply saying Jerusalem issue or a capital issue to be sorted out by both the parties. Jerusalem is not Berlin to be divided. It is not Chandigarh to be shared. This has had to be sorted out by the parties concerned. That is what India is moving. This is the area India is getting into, that, what I would say. Then what do I say in short, in nutshell? From the US, India will learn today how not to do certain things. If you can't solve the problem, at least don't complicate it. I think that is going to be a issue. And I don't think I'll be the only person who is sharing this opinion. We are all waiting for 2020. Let's wait it out. This is not a nice time. Let's wait it out and figure it out how things unfold in the United States. When it comes to Russia, yes, Russia is an enormous advantage, gives us a loan. How you deal with everybody. India should deal with all the political parties at different levels, not necessarily at a diplomatic level. If you can't deal with Hamas politically, deal with them through the security agencies. So therefore, we need to engage with everybody. So you never know how things are going to unfold, how things are going to be very useful for us. Engagement doesn't mean agreement. Engagement is you keep the lines of communications. And we need to engage in a much more robust fashion. If you look at it, we always say West Asia, Middle East is an extended neighborhood, historical relations, civilization, all of them very nice. We don't walk the talk. I think that is a major drawback until 2011. Now we have at least got into a level. But now, it's more like, this Abhimanyu syndrome. Abhimanyu's advantage is go and breaks the enemy front line. But the others have to follow. If you don't follow, whatever Modi does at a prime ministerial level will not happen on the ground. One simple example, Modi and the UAE agreed that the later will invest in India up to $75 billion. You know what? After 4 years, we just got $1 billion. I think that is where it is. You need to walk the talk, and that is going to be a challenge. When it comes to China, China's don't talk politics. I think that is more or less similar to what Modi's operations in the last 4 years. You are going to intensify the economic relations across the board. And ultimately, your foreign policy, foreign relations, strategic relations will have to bring tangible benefits to 1.4 billion Indians. That's what it's going to be. So therefore, Modi is not talking politics. When he talks strategic, whether it's Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Israel, or anybody, the strategic doesn't mean military security, no. It basically means, can you bring tangible economic benefits to India? And that's what it's going to be. And that is going to learn. There is a small rider. India has about 8 million plus expatriates in the region. And Chinese companies normally bring Chinese labor force. At least there are about 500,000 Chinese are there in the region, in various Chinese. So in the long run, while you learn from the Chinese example of intensifying economic cooperations, you're going to watch that there is going to be a Chinese expatriate labor which might prove a threat to or a challenge to India in the long run. Thank you very much.